Today's episode of Vice Versa, we're talking about Mercedes' upcoming 600-mile EV and their plans about going all electric by 2030, the truth about how green EVs truly are, Toyota's hydrogen debacle, EV towing, and more. And as usual, I'm joined by Ricky Roy. How you doing, Ricky?
Doing good, Matt. I was in Eugene, Oregon, actually, meeting with Archimoto, so I had a chance to have some fun with all their cool variants of the FUV and had a really good trip and got in late yesterday, but I'm back and had some fun. How about you? How you doing?
Pretty good. I've had a pretty quiet week. I just put out a video about floating cities, of all things. I don't know, it caught my eye when I was reading about it, and I thought there were some cool technologies at play, so I wanted to make a video on it. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit behind on my video this week, but it'll be going out tomorrow, and it is on the Stirling engine. So that was actually one of the really commonly requested new videos that I'd heard about. Matt and I both have the incredible pleasure of having such a smart audience of people who are always recommending and suggesting such great topics. So honestly, we could just scour our comment section and just have information and ideas for days. So just a thank you to all of you guys for constantly being awesome.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like the audience is smarter than me. Way smarter than me.
It's really nice. It's a good position to be in. It really is.
Yeah. Well, you ready to get started this week?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first story is Mercedes-Benz teasing a super efficient electric car with over 1,000 kilometers or 620 miles of range. And it's shorter than they previously announced because they made an announcement back in October of last year where they announced that it was going to have 1,200 kilometers or about 750 miles of range. And the idea is that they're targeting a single-digit figure for their kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, or about 6 miles per kilowatt hour, at normal highway driving speeds, which is a very aggressive target. And if they can pull it off, it's going to be amazing. But all of this is about efficiency, and they have a dedicated engineering team that's working on the effort. And what they talked about in this announcement, this update about it, is that the reveal will be next year. So 2022, they're going to reveal it. But it is just a concept car. It's not going to be a production car. And so their idea is that the technologies they come up with for this concept car will trickle down into their different platforms they're going to be releasing over the next 5 to 10 years. So for me, there was a little bit of a meh to that, because I'm not a fan of concept cars at all, but I do love the fact that they are investing a lot of time, money, and effort into the R&D around these technologies and these efficiencies. And even though it's going into a concept car, the idea is that these technologies can then be sprinkled into their other platforms. So what's your take on this news?
Yeah, my first thought was kind of to your point. This is a concept car. So when you have to dial back the expectations or the range numbers on a concept car you're not even going to make, what does that even mean? It's just an idea on paper. Okay, so it is really ambitious, and to put it into perspective, you mentioned that to achieve this, so they mentioned 6 miles per kilowatt hour, which would be the same size battery as a Model S, about 100 kilowatt hours. It's not like they're just ramming a lot of batteries into the car. They're trying to go further with each kilowatt hour of battery storage. To put that in perspective, our Tesla Model 3s do about 4 kilowatt hours. So we're talking like 50% better than that. And that, it sounds, I'm struggling to figure out where that can come from. So really the drag of the car, the wind resistance as you drive through the air is a big part of it. From that picture did look really great. The front headlights kind of, it kind of reminded me of like a McLaren, especially that light bar and everything. So maybe it's a really low down kind of a coupe. You got to get rid of the frontal area or the drag coefficient, both really. But Tesla's at around 0.2 today. I don't see them getting much lower than that. Maybe they've got some tricks up their sleeve. And then there's the subsystems, like you should go all LED for the lighting. You should have a heat pump. You should do everything you can to just lower the consumption of energy. But even with all that said, I have no idea how they'd get to 6 kilowatt hours per mile. But they are Mercedes. They're a billion-dollar company, and they have a lot of R&D. So that's the cool part when all these companies start to figure stuff out. And if they make that car and it does go 600 miles, I think they're going to have no problem selling it. And being Mercedes, it could be $150,000. They'll still sell because it'll be faster than all their AMG cars, and it'll be more luxurious than anything else. It'll be quiet and no vibrations, and it'll go 600 miles, which I don't think their gas cars do. It'd be a win all around. They could sell for $200,000, and I bet you they'd sell every one they make.
Yeah, it's like, I get why they do concept cars because it gets attention, it gets news press cycles. We're talking about it, but at the same time, for me, they could have come out and just talked about we have this dedicated engineering team, and the goal is to hit X, Y, and Z. And right now, we think we can probably hit X, Y, and Z, and we're planning on putting this out into our new platforms over the next 5 years. It's like they could have talked about it in that fashion without having to design a crazy concept car that's never going to actually be sold or see the light of day or anything like that. So to me, there's a heck of a lot of marketing spin, and that's the part about this that really turns me off. But when you dig into what they're trying to do, I give them a lot of credit, and I hope they can pull at least some of it off, and that some of this technology starts to come to fruition.
The one thing I do appreciate that they did is gave us some of those numbers, because they could have just said 600 miles of range and left it open, in which case you don't know. You have two variables: how far can you go and how many kilowatt hours of batteries do you have. But at least now with that number, we can help pin that down. So that is good for you. I'm glad they did that. When companies don't do that and just leave it open-ended, it literally means nothing. It could just be that you stuck way more batteries in and car gets heavier. There's other problems and stuff. But yeah, I hope they do it. They are Mercedes. They kind of invented the car. I think they could do it if anyone could. I'm hoping. Well, the next story ties into that a little
Directly.
bit. I think this is a good segue to jump right into it. But the next story is about Mercedes and how they are finally doing what seemingly every car company is doing, and they're announcing their date to sell their last internal combustion engine car, which is going to be 2030. So really, when I think about how Mercedes has fared the last couple of years, they've been losing out market share to Tesla in terms of the C-Class and the E-Class, at least, and maybe even the S-Class to the Model S. But for people who are trying to buy an economy car, if you're in the market for an economy car, EVs are probably a little bit of a stretch right now, and I completely understand that. But if you're in the market for a Mercedes C-Class or a 3 Series BMW, an Audi A4, well, you're right into Tesla territory. And honestly, if you pull up next to your friend who has a Tesla and he's way faster than you, his car is more reliable, it doesn't have any moving parts, it starts to become like you're driving the dinosaur. So people in that crowd, that class of buyer, are starting to move. And so I'm actually surprised that Mercedes and other companies haven't made this decision sooner, because they're going to be pretty obsolete pretty soon. But you got to remember also that Europe has much more stringent rules, and so they're going to be moving to electrification much quicker. So really, the key to this is that they're launching all new platform architectures. I believe it's 3 new platforms. So figure something small, crossover kind of a size, maybe like a full-size S-Class plus the SUV version or something like that. So this isn't like they're going to build one new thing. They're going to go with platforms. We've always talked about how much you invest in architecture speaks to your plan. Are you trying to just make one compliance car, or are you trying to really have a strategy where you can share cost and complexity and bring down some of those kinds of hurdles? So Mercedes does seem to be on that wagon. So yeah, 3 electric-only architectures. They mentioned 200 gigawatt hours of capacity between their partners and stuff, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much, especially when you consider what Tesla's up to. But these are early days. I'm sure some of these numbers are going to ramp very quickly, and well, they have to by 2030 if they want to have a shot. So I'm happy to hear this announcement, but to your point, it does feel like it's marketing fluff until it isn't. So we have to just wait and see how things progress. Are they going to be continuing to invest in ICE R&D? Are they going to continue to, those are the kinds of questions. If they get a jump and they really take things seriously next year, they don't have to wait, right? Or it could be sell gas cars till 2028 and we'll talk about it then, right? That's the problem with such a long target. We don't know the nuance of what they're going to do, but what do you think?
I think I'm a little more optimistic than you are, partly because next year they're going to have at least one EV in each segment that they sell already. And so these 3 new segments are going to be brand new EV only platforms. So it's kind of, they're already on their way to doing this and delivering it. Like you raised the giant question is, can they deliver? That's the giant question. So it's like they have plans. Some of them are going to start happening next year. We're going to start to see how those sales go. But the question is, will they be able to meet demand? Will they be able to supply enough cars? Will they actually put some of their backing behind selling those initial cars? And will they actually be able to build out all these gigafactories they're planning on building out? It's like, to me, it's like, that's kind of, for me, like the litmus test. It's like, okay, they've got 2 gigafactories built and they're building 2 more. It's like when we start to see that kind of a thing, you know that they're actually really taking it seriously and they're starting to ramp things up. So for me, it's just like you. Will they deliver? I'm cautiously optimistic because it seems like they're a little further ahead on this than some of the other automakers in the world, which we'll be talking about a little later. But there's a lot to, I think, be hopeful for around Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah. One argument that we've probably both heard on our channels and stuff when we talk about Tesla and others is that as soon as the OEMs like Mercedes and VW, and when these guys decide to flip the switch and start building EVs, that it's going to be game over. That hasn't been the case at all. Everybody's been struggling with stuff like software. The ID4 was delayed for months because of software, the ID3 as well. When I drove the Mach-E, the mapping for the throttle and the brake is really rough compared to what Tesla's feels like. If you've driven a Model 3 or a Model S, they have the perfect throttle mapping. When you hit the accelerator pedal, the sense of power output and the way it feels is absolutely perfection. The Mach-E was really coggy and it felt like it was trying to figure out what was going on. And I actually met with Kyle. He runs out of spec motoring and he does a lot more hardcore car testing than either of us do. And he was the first person I talked to who also mentioned that. And he got into specifics about the motors they've decided on and how they've struggled. But these are billion-dollar car makers that have been making cars for 100 years. And the argument has always been that they could make an EV, they just don't want to. That's not true. There's a lot that goes into it. And that's why our last story about Mercedes and the 6 miles per kilowatt hour is really interesting, because that's probably going to be where Tesla's lead is going to be the biggest at first. They've already built a car that's really good, and now they're optimizing, lowering the consumption of other components and subsystems. So if Mercedes does hit that figure, that they'd be leapfrogging right to the front, which is what people have been saying they'll do. But so far, no one has done. Including the EQS, which is a cool car, but there's miles to go for sure.
Yeah. Well, next story we can jump into is a study dispels the myth that electric cars pollute as much as gas-powered cars due to dirty grid electricity. And I love this topic so much. I actually did a video about 3 years ago now about EV myths. And this study is obviously the most recent one, but there was a study done by the University of Concerned Scientists back in, I think, 2015 that hit on the same exact point that what they talked about in this report. And essentially what they bring up is that it's an oldie but a goodie. People saying that EVs, you're charging it from electricity that was generated by coal, so it's just as dirty as a gas car. And also EVs are dirtier to manufacture up front because there's more resources and more output from manufacturing battery packs, which is true. But where I think people lose the thread is that over the life cycle of that car, it comes out way, way ahead of gas cars. And this chart alone, it kind of does a great job illustrating this point, where you can see and this is like basically a wells to wheels analysis. So it's the whole life cycle of the car, from manufacturing it to using it for its entire lifespan. And you can see how much this like teal color right here is how much gasoline the car is using and how much output, how much emissions it's putting out compared to what a battery electric does over the lifespan. So you can see that the manufacturing process of the BEV up front is a little higher than a gas car, but over the life cycle of the entire car, it comes out way ahead. And if you're curious of what these like little lines are on some of these BEV bars, it's the difference between what policies are currently planned for energy generation, for cleaning up the grid, versus what the Paris Accords is basically requiring countries to do. So it's kind of the range of where it's expected to be. So if people hit the Paris Accords, it would be at the lower end of the line. If they don't hit the Paris Accords, they'll be at the upper end of the line. So it's kind of the fudge factor for where those calculations are. So this is, to me, it's like, we need to get this information out more and more, because there's still this pervasive belief that EVs charged from a coal-powered grid are dirty, and they're actually not. They still come out way ahead. And going back to the University of Concerned Scientists, They actually have a thing on their website where you can actually plug in your zip code, the model of the electric car that you're looking at, and it will show you the life cycle analysis of that very specific car in your region based on the power sources in your region to show you where it's going to fall on the output compared to a gasoline car. And I just love this tool because this is a simple way of, if you live like down the south where it's 100% coal, you could still plug in your information here and get a very accurate idea as to what the output would be for you specifically. So what's your take on this?
Can we, first of all, that is such a cool website. Let's make sure to link that in the description so people can pull it up. It's that kind of visualization that really helps drive this point home. You and I have probably both gotten this comment, I'm going to say 5,000 times over the last couple of years, about how your EV is just a coal-powered car. What, first of all, people don't realize is coal is increasingly kind of dead. They're really getting shut down and we're moving away from it. But when I did my research, there's a link I made to a video that I covered this on. And in my research, the dirtiest grid was West Virginia, in the US anyway, where they have I think it's over 90% coal-based supply. But like, for example, in California, it's 40% renewable already today, which is part of why this argument is kind of it could go a long ways. But that article, the link that you have to the calculator can really help you understand where you live. But the bottom line, like Matt said, is EVs are so efficient. Even if you took coal to generate electricity, when you do that on a huge, large-scale power plant, that's way more efficient than burning gas in your little rinky-dink ICE engine. Yeah. And also, that happens in one site. Who's to say that you couldn't introduce like carbon capture, do something else there? I recently was in a rental car, which made me really appreciate my Tesla's cabin air filters, because I don't get the smell of gasoline anymore from the road. But we were sitting in traffic and there was this truck just spewing out pollution. And I was in a Smart 4 too. Terrible car, especially the gas version. I've heard the electric version is better. But when I was in that car, I was getting a headache from the whiff and the fumes of all that gasoline. So there's a lot of little moving pieces to this, but I'm really glad that people are starting to understand that these stupid talking points are not even close. Mm-hmm. EVs are so efficient, and that's kind of the underlying thesis behind my video about towing. Part of it is like EVs are so freaking efficient that any changes to the environment are really impactful. Whereas like a gas car is so wasteful, you go a little faster or you start towing something. Those are minute changes in regard to how much of that energy is just being wasted to the gas car. So. This is a really great point. And if anybody has questions, like sound off, we can loop around if there's any like questions or concerns that people have. But I think it's pretty clear. And people always I always joke about this, Matt. People become the biggest environmentalists when they talk about solar panels and EVs. Yes. Like no one's ever cared so much about the mining of nickel until we talk about electric vehicles. Like how about the drilling and fracking and mining and shipping and piping of gasoline? Like, yeah, you understand how much we waste before it even reaches your car. How much pollution has already been made. Forget your car burning it. And you're just constantly burning it up.
And it can't be recycled. Man. You're burning that fuel. It's gone forever. You've put it in the atmosphere. At the end of my car's life cycle, that battery pack can be recycled to make more batteries to go back into a new car. It's like you can't do that with gasoline. Once it's burned, it's gone. So it's like there's the argument when you just start to pick it apart, it just falls apart so quickly.
I know. I'm really glad we have that story, and we'll be sure to put a link to that calculator. I think that could really be illuminating for a lot of people.
Yep. Next up, you ready?
Yes. So moving right along, the next story is an interesting one. So Toyota's subsidiary Woven Planet acquires Lyft's Level 5. Level 5 is the name of their self-driving tech, their self-driving division. And when I read this story, I started to think, I've heard about Woven something or other. Turns out Toyota has these various subsidiaries, which is common, right? Alphabet owns Google and Waymo and some of these other companies. But like it's Woven Core, Woven Alpha, Woven Capital, and Woven Planet. And clearly one of the benefits you get to have when you're really big is you don't really have to be great. You can just buy the people that are proving to be great, right? Facebook buys Instagram. People kept saying, oh, Instagram might become the new Facebook. No, it won't, because Facebook will just buy it. before they start to become profitable. So I got this feeling, is Toyota secretly out there just killing it? And one day they're going to come out with a press release and go, oh, by the way, we've been working on this whole thing all along. And here's a fully electric 1,000-mile range, solid state battery, self-driving EV that we've been, or are they just kind of shooting in the dark and really not getting anywhere? I'm torn on where I fall with this because I don't know how far level 5 really got. Here's some pictures of some of the autonomous marketing material and what the visualization looks like from the computer. It's I would imagine that they're going to be aggregating a lot of other stuff. They have purchased other companies as well. And I think they're hoping to have some sort of a succinct self-driving platform. But what I think they're going to find is this isn't something that's easily pieced together. A lot of these tech stacks don't talk to each other, or they're not going to work well. So you can't just go around kind of gluing pieces together. But we'll wait and see, I guess. It could have also been kind of an acqui-hire, an acquisition hire, where they're going to get all these really smart engineers and scientists who've been working in this space for a while. But we shall see. The other company I mentioned was Carmera, is the other US-based spatial AI company that they've acquired. So they're making moves. I don't know if they're good moves or right moves, but they are making moves. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think this was an acqui-hire, because when you look at the details, with the acquisition of this company, they got 300 engineers, research scientists, and mobility specialists. So to me, that says they're trying to beef up their technology portfolio and get an acqui-hire to get all that expertise over to help them push their technology further forward. And you brought this up in a previous episode when we talked about full self-driving, about how with all the consolidation in the industry, you were saying deep pockets are going to win. That's where it's all going to go. So it's like you got places like maybe Uber that might not be able to compete. And it's like, here we got Lyft, who started out with great ambitions, but clearly does not have the deep pockets to keep this going. So it's inevitable that a lot of these smaller companies are going to start get snapped up by people. To me, it makes so much sense that Toyota's doing it. Toyota is this, I'm getting whiplash with them, because on one side, they're investing so heavily in this. And then on the other side, they're basically doing nothing with electric, and they're basically still all in on fuel cell. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's infuriating to me how they're just all over the map. They don't seem to have a clear purpose or goal in their overall vision. And if they have one, they haven't done a good job communicating it. So it's given me a lot of doubt and worry about where Toyota is heading. So even though this specific thing is like, this is great to see, but in the big picture, I am way concerned just because of how they're just so all over the map with what the CEO says publicly. And then they do things through PR that says the complete opposite of what the CEO said about, CEO basically bashed BEVs, but then publicly they make comments about electrics might be the future. It's like, what, come on, guys, let's get focused and have a coherent strategy. They don't seem to have it.
Yeah, I think there was an article that they were actively lobbying lawmakers to hey, let's slow down on this whole EV thing. Let's simmer down a little bit. And then they come around and talk about this. Hard to know. The problem here really is, this is one of those, and this is what I always hated about engineering, is you got nothing until you have everything. You don't have a product until it's finished. I can't go, hey, this code I'm writing, it's not done, but look how cool it is so far. It's like, okay, but what are you going to do with that, right? You have to finish it. And with self-driving, it's such a tricky thing. Clearly, I think Lyft, I think you hit it on the head. They didn't have the funds. They didn't have the deep pockets to continue this research. Those 300 employees are making a lot of money. I can guarantee you that.
Yes.
And the progress could potentially be very slow. And you have to have the patience and the pocketbook to keep that operation afloat. So here's to hoping that Toyota can take this and move it into the right direction. But I kind of fear that they don't have they're not like market leaders in this space. So clearly, when you hire someone who's doing work outside of what you're really typically known for, which is manufacturing, like Toyota kills it with manufacturing, it'll be tricky. But we'll see. Hopefully good news, I guess.
Yeah.
When you have money, I guess you buy people up.
Yeah. I was going to say, we have a couple of super chats. I just want to call it. Lawrence McGill, thank you so much for your super chat. And then we have a second one from Frederick Stringkorb. I hope you said your name right. Enjoy the work both of you do. So thank you very much to both of you guys for those super chats.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Frederick. Appreciate you guys.
Yes. Want to move on to the next story because we'll kind of keep bashing Toyota, I guess.
This is the better of the two stories. Let's go.
Yeah. So for this one, the Great Toyota Zero Emissions Summer Olympics Debacle. And if you're not familiar with the setup of this whole story, a couple of years ago, Toyota started kind of coming out and saying, yeah, for the Japan Olympics, we're going to be, having fuel cell hydrogen buses taking all of the Olympians and the people around the Olympic Village to and from the events. And we're going to be announcing a working prototype battery of our solid state battery. They were kind of coming out and just like throwing down the gauntlet of saying that they're kind of at the forefront of zero emissions vehicles. And not so much. It turns out either that was just a big lie or just a big PR debacle. So what's come out from, when you think about it, they're hydrogen fuel cell buses that are ferrying the Olympians around. It's kind of all smoke and mirrors because each bus costs about $900,000 for a 6-year lease compared to about $220,000 for a diesel-powered bus. So not a great value from that point of view. Local and national authorities had to pony up subsidies to cover 80% of those costs for the first 100 buses. And the fuel costs of just running the buses are up to 2.6 times higher than diesel. So it's more expensive up front, it's more expensive to run, and it's still not done because most bus terminals in Japan don't have hydrogen refueling capacity at the moment. So you have to drive those buses further just to refuel them, which is already more expensive, 2.5 times more expensive than diesel. And when it comes down to the solid state battery that they had promised to reveal during the Olympics, just radio silence. There's been nothing on that at all. And we've talked about it before, but solid state batteries are years away. So even if they showed something today, it's not going to be something that they could be selling next year. It's years away. So I'm not surprised they just kind of let that one slide and kind of fade off into the distance. But what's your take on this craziness? The one last thing I will say is there is a little bit of bashing on hydrogen for also not being a completely clean thing, because to make it, it's actually a dirty process right now. But green hydrogen is coming. It's not a if it's going to happen, it's a when it's going to happen. It may not be here next year, but 5 years from now, 8 years from now, 10 years from now, there will be 100% green hydrogen being created, hopefully at a cost that is cost competitive. But right now it's not there. So there was a lot of bashing in the article that I was talking about where it was just hammering that point home. And I think personally, I think that's a little short-sighted because today there's not hydrogen fuel cell stations. Today there's not green hydrogen readily available at cost. But eventually that could get here. But the whole idea that the buses cost $900,000 compared to $220, that's just insane to me. What's your take?
That's really well said. So there's, like, for example, there's a lot of platinum in the fuel cell. It turns out energy is hard. Who would have thought? I do think there's a lot of kind of showboating and a lot of really, really cocky, a lot of hubris going into the Olympics. By the way, they had a full year more to work on this problem, and completely radio silent. I honestly thought that they would have some sort of a vehicle with solid state batteries, because again, you got to remember, we can make a solid state battery today. Will it last 10 years? No. Will it be totally perfect? Will it cost an exorbitant amount? Yes. But I kind of thought they would just pull it off and say, hey, this bus right here has solid state batteries. It costs like $10 million to make because they're so expensive. And also, they only have a 100 cycle life before the ceramic or the glass cracks and they don't work anymore. But we can still show you what's possible. That's what I thought was going to happen. Here's a look at a solid state battery that will go 2,000 miles. But the caveat is we haven't figured out how to make it cheap yet or long lasting enough yet. Nope, didn't happen. That was a disappointment. And then this hydrogen thing was also a disappointment. One thing about Japan that really surprised me, I was looking at countries and what percentage of their energy production is fossil fuel based. Japan is really high, as advanced as Japan is. And for anybody who's been to Japan, Japan's like operating on another level. Like the efficiency of their cities and their layouts and their Shinkansen bullet trains, it's like a country from the future, except with energy. They're really behind. I want to say it was over 70% is still fossil fuel based, way behind the US, way behind, a lot of countries. Only like India, like China and India are the only two that are kind of behind Japan. So that surprised me. And I think that gets to the heart of why this has been a problem for them and why they're kind of betting on hydrogen. I think there's just something where they are a little bit behind. My video that's coming out, by the way, Matt, I told you that one of the goals of being full time is to get ahead of the video schedule. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to report this week's video is not done, but next week's video is. And it's on artificial photosynthesis. And so if you've seen, to your point about why we should not just scrap hydrogen. Today, our solar panels are photovoltaic, the way they work. Photons hit these panels, knock free electrons away, and you got electricity. But you have to use that electricity that instant. There's no storage built in. This artificial photosynthesis panel that people are working on, and there's some recent developments with, is different. It actually absorbs carbon dioxide from the air in this reaction, just like a leaf would, and it produces hydrogen. So it's far more efficient than a 20% efficient solar panel then running electrolysis. This is actually it jumps that step and just acts like a leaf does almost. And so the byproducts are oxygen, and it produces hydrogen out of. This is like my favorite story maybe of the entire year. We're not. It's still years away. Do watch my video. There's a lot more in there, but that's exactly what you were saying. That's the sort of a breakthrough that would completely change the landscape of what's possible with hydrogen. So we definitely should keep investing in it, and we shouldn't just write it off. And for a bus, hydrogen maybe does make sense. I think it could go either way on that one.
Right. Yeah.
We have a super chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We do have a super sticker from David McCarthy. It says #1 fan. Thank you very much, David. And
really
we also have
David. Thank you.
And was it the Knife Dude? Thank you very much. It means a lot.
And especially because he didn't even know how to do a super chat about 5 minutes ago. So thank you, the Knife Dude. Appreciate you. And if you let us know your first name, I'm good, and we can start to not call you the Knife Dude if you like. It's up to you.
Ready for the last story?
Yeah. So the last story, when I added to the wall, I was reading. I got about halfway through and I added to the wall, and I kept reading, and I was a little disappointed because they didn't really offer concrete examples. But the story is about how we solve the electric pickup truck's Achilles heel, which is towing and range. So again, shameless plug. I made a video. If you want to understand exactly why it appears that EVs suffer with towing and stuff, I have a video on this on my channel. You can check it out. It really gets into the details exactly. I think you'd be an expert on this at the end of that video. But really what it gets down to is there's a couple of challenges. First of all, they mentioned here the charging time, right? Even if a gas car goes from 18 or 20 miles a gallon down to 10 when you're towing, people don't really care because those kinds of trucks have like 25-gallon tanks. They'll go 250 miles, even 10 miles a gallon, and then refill in 5 minutes everywhere there's a gas station. So people who tow with gas cars never worry about this. But with EVs, we're still building out stations. And if your 300-mile range Model X or Rivian plummets down to about 100 miles of range, there's probably stretches where you don't have charging infrastructure in place. And so does that mean it's game over for the EV? No, not at all. I think we're going to continue to see better and more efficient numbers like we talked about with Mercedes, where the EVs will go further and further per charge. But also, we're going to reimagine how we do this problem. Matt always talks about how when you go to EVs, when you make a revolutionary change like that, there's a whole new realm of possibilities and new ways of reimagining solutions. And this is exactly the kind of example. For example, if you're towing a trailer, an EV trailer should be covered by solar panels. The top of an EV trailer should just be completely blanketed, as many as you can fit. The reason is you could literally be powering some of that energy need from the sun in real time. And then even when you're parked or you're taking a break or anything else, you can be recharging the battery pack. Another way that they could do this, so here's some examples of some of the routes that proved to be very challenging based on if you can't make it to the stations based on range reductions. Another solution would be that future EV trailers have batteries built in, just like EVs do on the floor. And there's like a little plug in the tailgate that you plug into the towing harness. And your car could then leverage that battery pack. So it doesn't mean game over at all. We're early days. There are challenges today for sure. If you're planning on towing a 35-foot travel RV, mobile home, that would probably be tough today. But I am optimistic that we're going to have a really like well-rounded solution with more charging infrastructure, more batteries, solar, the whole nine in the next like 5 or 10 years. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. This kind of fits right into that wheelhouse. I'm always trying to hit the hammer on the topic of don't judge things as success or failure based on what we know today, because there are challenges that we have to overcome still in some regards, especially around EVs. It's all new. It's still very new to us. We're still figuring it out. So there's still a lot of possibility for addressing this issue. You hit my favorite one, which is put solar panels on the roof of the trailer. It's like you have this huge trailer behind you. You might be able to fit like 20 solar panels on top of the trailer, and you might be able to get an insane amount of power out of that. It's not going to cover you completely, but it's going to help mitigate some of those problems. So there's, in the aerodynamics of all of this stuff, it's like we need to stop making trailers these big blunt-sided objects you're just hauling down the highway. It's like they all need to be, aerodynamics has to be part of the equation for all of this stuff. So, better tires, better rolling resistance, there's all of these things that we need to take into account. We're going into a new path, and we have to figure these problems out. Today, towing with an EV might be a problem, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we might have kind of cracked the nut and made it work. So it's definitely too early to say, it's never going to work, even though there are people out there saying it's never going to work. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I always love is it the Airstream, the trailers that are really beautiful and bespoke and handmade by the same family. It's an incredible American company. What I didn't know is how expensive they were, because they are bespoke and handmade and all that. And there's a huge wait list right now for them. But yeah, they figured this out years ago. That thing clearly stands apart from every other trailer out there. We've always lived in, I think of like the internal combustion engine as like the ultimate symbol of waste, right? It's such a wasteful technology that no one's ever cared about doing better. Trailers are, to be fair, a big rectangle is really space efficient on the inside. I get that. But you're towing around literally the worst possible, like the frontal area, and the drag coefficient is probably like 0.9. It's terrible, right? So we've never thought about doing better. But I think with EVs being so efficient that every little handle, doorknob, window, side mirror, we're starting to obsess about every detail. And the engineer in me, the designer in you, must just love that. This is what we should have always been doing. So I can't wait to see the future projects that emerge. There's a Ryan from the Kilowatts was sharing with me. I'm gonna forget the name of the company. There's a company that's building a trailer specifically for EVs, like an RV. Early days, they're still working on it, but I think they called it. I'll have to mention it later. But it's really cool. There are companies now starting to tackle this problem, and I cannot wait. I have a dream to tow some custom dedicated RV for EVs with my Cybertruck or some EV truck, and see the country. So I'm hoping that's still possible.
Yeah, I have that same dream too. So it's like I want it to become a reality. So come on, guys, work faster on this.
Let's go. And also a big thank you to Eric Kessler, as always, for the super chat. He says, "Wow, great topics, brothers. Appreciate you as always, Eric. Yeah, you rock. Thank you."
Thank you, Eric. So that was the last topic of the night. So we're going to transition to the Q&A portion where we'll start combing through the comments. Sound off and let us know what your feedback is on any of these topics.
That being said, there is some breaking news that we maybe should have put on the wall, but we didn't really have enough time to get into it.
Oh, yeah.
Matt and I were talking about just before the show, and there are a lot of comments about it earlier in the show. And so I kind of mentioned, we'll talk about it, which is Trevor Milton, the former founder, and he was CEO. Then he was like a board of directors member or something. Basically, he was getting demoted at every opportunity. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
He's indicted by a grand jury on three counts of fraud. So Trevor Milton, you could say, I guess, officially is a fraud. People have been saying that for a while. Juan is asking if I meant polydrops for the trailer. No, Juan. This is a full-blown RV, which is cool. So Trevor Milton was one of those people that I never, whenever I saw the guy on stage, he just irked me. He came off as a complete like snake oil salesman. He knew nothing about the technology. You could just tell from like the lingo. You can tell so much about a person from like the way they talk. If you get into a room with a bunch of developers, you can tell if you're a developer or not. If the way you say things or like your terminology and jargon, I can tell if you're really a developer or not. Same probably goes for you and the tools that you guys use in design and development stuff. So he clearly just came off as a total fraudster to me, and I think he has done irreparable harm to the entire industry. There are people now basically accusing every EV company. If you slip on schedule, if anything happens, you're a fraud, which is really depressing to me because you can say, oh, they're behind, they're not smart enough to figure this out. That's one thing. To call somebody a fraud means you're deceiving, that you're actually like, actively trying to, and that is a way different thing than not being good enough to make it, which sucks, but we all fail at things, right?
Yep.
So I personally, and Nikola's stock has taken a battering, as you could imagine, because Eric Berendorf says Theranos, which is exactly the example Matt mentioned while we talked before the show.
Yep.
We can talk about that if you like. But yeah, this was irreparable is the amount of harm that they've caused. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's the whole Theranos thing. It's like whenever there's a company that talks about some grand plan that sounds too hard to achieve, Theranos is brought out like a bully club of like, it's just another Theranos. And it drives me nuts when I hear that brought up. It's like, we have to judge each company on its own merits. Let's not make everybody a Theranos because you don't believe that they can do what they're saying that they can do. And here comes Nikola doing the exact same thing. It's like, oh, great. We have another Theranos here. And this is just going to become another bully club that people will pull out and say, oh, I'm bringing up Lucid Motors. It's a fraud. Hit him with the Nikola, stick. It's an unfair thing. And it's something that I feel bad for all the employees of Nikola. I feel bad for all the other startups in the EV space that are now going to be hit with this Nikola stick because here's a proven fraud. It makes me sad. It just makes me sad for the whole industry. And I really hope that everybody watching this and listening to this keeps a cool mind and doesn't end up using that bully club of, oh, it's just another Nikola. It's like we have to judge each company on its own merits. And if they fail, it's not because they were trying to defraud people. Fraud is a very specific thing. There's a difference between trying and failing versus not ever going to be able to succeed because you're lying about being able to do it, and then you get caught in that lie. There's a complete difference there. So it's like we have to understand most companies are down that first path where they try to do something great and they fail at it. Then there's a small group of companies that go down the Nikola route, which is they're just trying to defraud investors. So we have to remember which is which.
Thank you to Rob Womack for the super chat sticker. I believe it's a super fly pair, as it says, hey you. And then shortly thereafter, he says, man, that was a dumb sticker. I disagree. Thank you, Rob.
Sticker. It was awesome. Thank you.
My son is getting into Kung Fu. It's the cutest thing. He makes the sounds and stuff, and it's really, really cute. And so he's really now, so we were watching Kung Fu Panda, which is one of my favorite, I think it's my favorite DreamWorks animation movie series. All three of them are fantastic if you guys haven't checked them out. But the wise old Master Oogway at some point says, one often finds his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it, which is very like Oedipus Rex if you're into the tragedies. But so Oedipus Rex, his father kicks him out thinking like the oracle told him my son's gonna kill me and marry my wife, and at every step, every action he takes to prevent it is what causes it. So I bring this up because if you start to tweet that somebody's a fraud, or you start to like ruin somebody's image, you could bring about the outcome that you are setting out to do. And suddenly, if the funds dry up and some company has lost all investor respect, and they dry up and they go belly up, then you can go, you see, they were a fraud. And it's like, no, they actually might have made it if they had just been given a shot, raised money for a factory. And you got to remember, like, a factory takes billions of dollars to make. Rivian and Lucid both have recently gotten over like 4.5, I think, for Lucid billion dollars for Lucid and 2.5 billion for Rivian. And yeah, that's good news. That means they're going to actually have the money to build a factory, which is very expensive. But be cognizant of our power on social media. Really, anybody, even if you have no following, if you say company blank is a fraud and something, and some guy who hates this company or is a short seller or something else takes your tweet, retweets it, next thing you know, it could be going viral. And you could be like completely spelling doom for a company, all because, and it's just a shame that could happen, but it does happen. So we should definitely give companies a shot. And when things don't go right, we can judge them for that. I think that's probably the better way to do it.
Well said. And thank you for the super chat, RCDIY. He said, at 10K PSI, hydrogen needs 7 times the liters versus gasoline. Engineering explained at 1150, the Toyota hydrogen video. Good call out.
Yeah, so hydrogen is terrible in terms of volumetric density.
Yep.
But it's fantastic for gravimetric. So per kilogram, it's killer. Nothing competes with hydrogen. It's better than gasoline, diesel. It's better than anything. But volumetrically, it's just such a small and very difficult to compress element.
Here's a question that I thought was interesting from Max the Lion. He said, "Gents, what videos are you both working on? Are you going to do a take on vaccination this year?" I would so love to do a take on vaccination. I'm just not sure if it's out of the wheelhouse of my regular videos on my channel, that might catch people off guard if I do a deep dive into mRNA vaccines and the vaccination and how all this kind of stuff is playing out, the science behind it. I find it fascinating.
I agree. I'm actually reading his comment. It says vaccination. I'm wondering if he meant vacation. What are you both working on? Are you going to take a vacation this year?
Oh, vacation this year. It looks like vaccination.
I know. I could be wrong. It does say vaccination.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. But either way, so I kind of mentioned artificial photosynthesis coming up for me.
Yeah.
Stirling engine. We have a video on Archimoto that I was just attending. And flow batteries. I had a chance to meet with a company that makes flow batteries. So those are kind of on my horizon. Yeah. I'm at the point where I think I need another editor because I'm really falling behind in a major way.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. It's like I've got like 5 videos in one phase of process right now. Like one of the next ones that's coming up for me is a company called Cornell in France that makes computers that can be used as space heaters. So it's basically heat recovery systems where they put their servers where they actually need to be used in, apartment buildings or boiler systems in houses and whatever. It's a really kind of fascinating take on rethinking the whole server data center approach instead of building giant. Basically, it's like the microfactory approach from Arrival. It's like instead of building a major factory, you put the servers where they're needed for heat recovery, and then you can use them as a distributed server system. It's a very fascinating approach. So that for me is one of the ones I'm excited about coming up.
Very good. Very good.
And if it is vacations, I have no plans for a vacation this year.
I've been traveling a little more and I've been excited about the prospect of traveling more, but we have a trip to Canada to meet with Nouveau Monde Graphite Mine, and my wife and my kids were going to join us at the end of that trip, but Canada is shutting down again. Sadly, I think we're not clear and we're not out of the woods, which is so depressing, but here we are. Daniel Mader says, fraud in the EV market is a sign of market maturity. I actually agree. That's interesting and funny, but it's true, right? When something is so mature, you're going to have all kinds of shysters and all kinds of random aspects to it, which is funny. Then there's a comment I want to address from Jonathan Root. He says, Lucid is a fraud on their range. You can't be a fraud on one thing. That's not how frauds work. You're either a fraud or you're not. And I completely disagree with him. So he says, no test drives for the press or anything. That I 100% agree with. That's total BS. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but that's their prerogative. I don't know. But as far as their range claims, it's not out of the realm of possibility at all. The long range Lucid has a 117 kilowatt battery pack, so more batteries than like the Model S, for example, which means it'll be heavier. Your foot room in the back is compromised. So in the back, your knees are up higher because the floor is higher. So because of that extra room for batteries compared to a Model S. And the end efficiency is the same as like a Model 3. So not crazy, not ludicrous at all, well within the realm. And to Jonathan, I would say this is exactly what I was talking about. Lucid is claiming something. It's not crazy at all. Their range numbers are completely within what you'd expect to see. Can they execute? Can they deliver? We shall see. But they are now flush with cash and finishing up a factory. So I've actually heard a little bit of good news lately from them. So let's hope that they do well. But yeah, fraud is, you're either a fraud or you're not. There's no, you can't like pick and choose like, oh no, they're very legitimate here, but they're a fraud here. It doesn't work like that.
And there's no evidence of it yet. That's the other side of it. Let's wait till we get the car and see what the actual range is. And if it's wildly off, then we can start like trying to peel that onion apart and figure out, did they lie deliberately or did they overpromise and underdeliver?
Yeah, exactly. Rob Womack says the OEMs will struggle mightily with EVs, mostly because they have never cared about efficiency. Very true. Sedans are pretty aerodynamic looking, but they're not overly aerodynamic looking. They don't go to like the lengths of Tesla does, for example. But that will have to change rapidly because you don't want to be the company that has to put 10% more batteries to get the same range as your competitor, because then you're 10% more expensive and heavy and you're not going to sell. Yep. So they're going to have to care very quickly.
Yeah. Efficiency is required for profitability. So they're going to be forced to do it.
Eric says, have you guys thought about doing unboxings and reviews? That'd be kind of fun. I don't know what kind of products they would have to be.
Yeah.
We're not,
it's like, for me, my next video coming out next week is the Span electric panel.
Nice. Yeah.
I couldn't do an unboxing for that. It's like
kind of a big box, huh?
An electrician had to install it, so it's like I couldn't do an unboxing for that. So it's like I'm curious, like if you have suggestions on products that you think fit into our channel's topic structures, I would love to know what products you would like me to take a look at or Ricky to take a look at. It's like, I'm all ears. It's like, I would love to do more product reviews. They're actually fun to do.
Yeah, I agree. And there's probably some little things that we could do. There's a company that there's a company that I've been talking to that does a solar inverter plus battery. It's like a 6 kilowatt-hour battery pack.
Yeah.
And the price is pretty decent. And what's really cool is you could have a little array of panels on like the ground for backup situations and use this as the inverter and battery storage and run to your grid and potentially provide power if something were to go wrong. It's a really cool application for like off-grid situations and stuff. So I will be covering that video eventually. Yeah. I've had this question a few times. So Bobby asked, are those swords in the back? So right here.
That's a sword.
There, those two. So the black one on top is a katana that my brother got me like 10 or 20 years ago. I've always loved Japanese culture and katanas and like steel making and just general stuff like that. So that is my sword, and I got my wife one, the white one underneath, when we got married. So yeah, those are katanas. David Holmes actually hit up on. David Holmes is clearly in the know. He says, review portable power stations Blue Yeti and EcoFlow. EcoFlow I am going to be reviewing later in the year, and I think Blue Yeti Ben Sullins has done. So check out Ben Sullins' channel. He's done that one.
I actually have the Ego power station, which has you can swap out the batteries, and I have a solar panel that you can plug into it as well. And I've been thinking about doing a review of that. I actually used that the day that my Span panel got installed because I had no power, and I pulled that in the house and I hooked my refrigerator into it, a bunch of fans, so I could continue working and stay cool because we were in the middle of a heat wave. So it was like, it was a lifesaver having that thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and clearly there's a lot of people who are interested. Robert says maybe we can try out some Tesla tequila on the air. I could go for that.
Yeah. We could do it live, and by the end of the episode, you'll be standing on your desk singing.
Hey. Eric says, way to go, Matt. I want the span in my house. So the span is a smart electrical service panel. Really, really awesome. If you guys are into smart homes, this would be kind of the gatekeeper to your entire smart home. You could monitor every circuit, every room in real time and go, weird, why is the guest room suddenly pulling so much energy, and figure out that somebody left something on. Or it's really cool stuff. I'd love to get one as well.
Deb Dutta just said, is that ATP shirt somehow related to tennis? No. It's a tech podcast. It's the Accidental Tech Podcast. Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of interest in these power stations. That's great.
Yeah, for good reason. They are super cool. And it goes all the way down to little battery packs that are solar powered. My brother bought one. He texted me a couple of days ago. So it's just like a little 20 milliamp hour, those little ones you carry around in your pocket. And the one he had a solar panel on it. He left it outside, and it took him, I think he said it took him like 6 days to fully charge, but he has a fully charged battery. Still kind of cool, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if that heat is a problem for the battery, but yeah.
Well, that's a good question. You're putting it in the sun to bake it. That doesn't seem like a smart idea for a battery pack.
Doesn't sound good, yeah.
Juan just asked, when are you coming to San Diego? To me. I would love to come to San Diego. I have no idea.
Soon. He'll come soon. There was so Brian Gurr says putting solar panels on an RV won't help much with the towing vehicle. You can cover your roof and barely have enough power to keep your house batteries charged. So there is a lot of roof area on a trailer. First of all, you could probably be generating like 4,000 watts pretty easily, and I can just do a real rough calculation.
I was going to say, a friend of mine is actually driving around the country in an RV that he retrofitted with solar panels to charge up a battery pack, and they're living basically fully off the grid. I mean, the truck uses gasoline, but their RV is fully solar powered. They top up, their batteries never get tapped every day. They have never had to plug in. So it is absolutely possible.
So if you were getting like 500 watt hours per mile, and you're going 60 miles an hour and you cover 60 miles, you'd need 30 kilowatt hours. The solar that I'm thinking you could probably get away with on a trailer could cover about 3 or 4 of those kilowatt hours in real time. So that's not nothing. That's that's more than 10%. So it's something.
If you're shaving off 10, 20%, it's like every bit counts. It's like, that's great. Why would you not?
And then when you get to your destination, you park and you open up the awnings and your chairs and you're hanging out and relaxing. The car is charging up all day.
Yeah.
How cool would this be if you tried to? And if Dusty's not in the chat today, he must be busy. But if he was here, he'd know the reference. I think there's a family doing this where they're just touring the country on solar power. So when they run out of power, they'll find a destination, pull over and stop. If it's a day or two to fully charge, and then they'll start driving again. So that'd be so cool to do. Just like completely driving on sunshine, off the grid.
There's another aspect of trucks. I think somebody in the comments in a previous video brought this up, which was you could put the battery pack in the trailer itself and not in the cab, so that when they pull up to drop off their cargo and they get their next trailer, it's like fully charged, ready to go, and they can zip right off, fully charged.
Exactly.
Have plenty of battery. It's like we gotta just think about this stuff in different ways. So you put solar panels on it, you put batteries in there. It's like, and so it's crazy the kinds of things you can do when you start to think outside the box.
Well, you're right. So if you could just, when you drop off your load to pick up the next load, that would have a fully charged battery. You slap it in and you start driving, and it could power your car while you're on the go.
Right.
Fantastic. Also, downhill sections in a trailer, in a semi, are really hairy because you're dissipating huge amounts of power, energy through the brake pads. And with an EV, you could just charge back up. So that would be pretty exciting as well.
Daryl McBain asked, is the Halcyon Wind Power Pods getting anything to show yet? I have not seen anything yet.
I think we've both touched on that company. I haven't heard anything either. Do you have any M1 Mac products, Matt?
Yeah, I have a MacBook. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, we have three. Our entire company is running on these M1 MacBooks. They're incredible. No Mac Mini yet, though, Gary. But I'm sure it'd be great.
My wife has the new M1 Mac Mini, and she loves it.
Nice. Okay.
Oh, hey, Bill. Bill commented, it's awesome to have you here, Bill. He said, any suggestions for reconditioning Ego batteries? I've had a couple fail, and they were fairly new. Thankfully, I have several other of their tools, so I have extras. I've heard that from people. I've never had one fail.
I have two, but they were early, like 2018, 2017 batteries.
And they failed?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've got
Call
all my
Ego.
I've never had one fail, and my oldest batteries I think are over 5 years old, and it's like I've never had one fail.
Oh wow, so you've been a long-term customer. Okay,
And-
Bill, I would tell you to call Ego because I called them and they wanted like the serial number. I went to Home Depot and got the receipt. When you buy these kinds of things, keep the receipt. That will come in handy. And they're a really cool company, even if it's a couple years old. I bet you they'll honor their warranty and send you a new battery.
I've been very impressed with their customer service and the team over there, so it's like I would definitely reach out to them.
Robert asked, what antivirus do I use on my Mac? I have never used antivirus software on my Mac in 15 years. And when I was running Windows before Mac, I would basically just reformat every 6 months and back everything up on Windows. But in the
That's
Mac
hardcore.
world, I was if you minimize how much stuff you're installing from like unknown parties and stuff, you'll be in good. I think you'll be okay.
Deb Dutta, can we have Sean Mitchell on the show? If so, give him some chips because he likes to eat on live stream. I would love to have Sean on. Sean's great.
Sean would be great. We can
like
make
Sean.
that happen.
Yeah.
He has a very early Model S, and he has over 250,000 miles on it.
That's insane.
Incredible, right? Yeah, I don't know anybody who's had one longer than him, but incredible.
Yeah, back to the Mac antivirus for a second. It's like I've never used it. I had to have it on one of my work computers because my business, they forced everybody to have it. And when they put it on there, it brought all of our Macs to a screeching halt. And I ran a creative team. And so we were using like Photoshop and After Effects and like all these crazy tools to do this stuff. And it was making our jobs almost impossible. And so I just went over to them and was like, okay, you're taking this off my entire team's computers because it's bringing work to a halt. So it's like my group was the only group in the company that didn't have antivirus
Have to do it.
on our Macs because we had to because it was just abysmal.
Yeah, it's really, really bad. Bill, I think it was Bill who asked. Yeah. Oh, no, it wasn't Bill. Who was it who asked about the antivirus? Anyways, whoever asked about the antivirus, Bong Hollywood mentioned that he just cleaned my Mac. That's actually a really good piece of advice because when you uninstall, this kind of drives me crazy about Mac, but there's no uninstall process. And people think, oh, just grab the application and throw it away. But the problem is there are other places like application support where files will be saved to.
Yep.
So that stuff doesn't get clean when you do that. And Clean My Mac takes care of it.
Yeah.
Apple should have bought Clean My Mac 12 years ago and integrated it into OS X.
It's a great tool.
What they're doing.
I use it too.
So I would recommend doing that too.
Yeah. Eric brought up that Fred from Electric has 400,000 miles. Wow.
Crazy.
That's a lot of
400,000
driving.
miles or kilometers? Yeah, miles. That's super awesome.
Oh, that's right. Kilometers. Yeah.
I'm not
So
sure.
that's a lot.
He might have meant miles. Eric would let us know. The Chevy Bolt EV battery recall also not doing us any favors in the EV world.
No.
And it also goes to show you that building EVs isn't as easy as people think, and that OEMs aren't, or the legacy automakers aren't going to just snap their fingers and suddenly have great EVs. It's tough work.
But that also got blown out of proportion because like BMW had a recall because their gas cars were bursting into flames. So it's like, This is not.
I didn't hear that
This is
news story. Somehow they're not getting coverage on that one.
that happened like a year or two ago, and it was like there wasn't a ton of coverage. There was some news stories, and then it just kind of like faded out, and it was like it was a massive recall, and so it's like, but a battery gets recalled, forget about it.
I know. You got to remember the parent companies of some of the big media companies kind of answer that question for you. Tesla AI Day should be really awesome. Chris, I think it's coming up. Is it next week?
I think so.
If it falls before our Thursday show, we'll talk about it then. Otherwise, we'll talk about it the week after. But it should be fascinating and awesome. And RCDIY asked which editing software we use. We're both Mac and Final Cut Apple Motion users. So yeah, Final Cut.
Final Cut all the way. Well, it's actually time. We should wrap this up. Any other comments you want to jump on before we call it?
Nope. I think there's some Linux nerds nerding out about which distro of Linux they're running, which sounds fascinating. But I think thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate you.
And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss an episode. We're live every Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. And you can always listen to the podcast version on the go at viceversa.show. As always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.